in the end, we always said number one priority is family. Number one priority is that it doesn't affect our relationships. And kind of like how we say in the business, put the business first. When it dealt with our dynamic relationships, we put family first. And no matter what would happen, we'd all meet for dinner on Sunday night at her house, show up for each other and support. It never bled into where it hurt our personal relationships.
Welcome to episode 104 of the AFT Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Levitt. And in this episode, we have Rob and Sharon Woods from Woods Design Builders in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I've spoken about the Builder 20 group, which I'm part of, and Rob and Sharon are part of that group. But a lot of the listeners had reached out asking, how do we take over the family business? How's that transition? What's the best way to do that? And I couldn't think of a better company to speak with than Rob and Sharon, who had taken over the family business and the complexity and how they've diversified their roles and responsibilities and worked on the marketing strategies and social media and everything that comes with running a company in this day and age. They give some amazing advice. They talk about their business, the best way to set it up, how to make that transition successfully. So without further ado, let's get started. And today we have with us Rob and Sharon Woods, who are both principals at Woods Design Builders. So welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and a little background. So Rob and Sharon, I met, I speak about the Builder 20 program a lot. And fortunately, Rob and Sharon are in our group and have a lot of expertise. They've given me a lot of education and knowledge this past few years that I've been involved with them. So they have a lot of good information to share. And I guess to get started, especially being brothers, and just to set the tone for this episode, a lot of the people that have listened have said, hey, Brad, we're looking at taking over a family business. We're taking over a family company. And Rob and Shane have done that, right? And how do you do that successfully? And so there's a lot of technical advice that they're going to be given. But to start, before we get into that, what's each of your roles at the company?
So I'll start. My role is really the back of the house, finance, contracting, negotiating our master design build agreement with clients, and then everything to do with accounting, HR, and everything like that. So I'm kind of a desk jockey. Shane, on the other hand, is out there. I'll let him speak for it, but, he's managing the field.
Yeah, so I basically manage all the projects in the field, have a lot of the client interactions. And then once Rob negotiates the master contract and it gets into the estimating, I'm involved with that as well.
So when you say the master contract, which I guess you're initiating, Rob, from the beginning, what does that entail? Because my understanding is you guys are lump sum, right? You're not cost plus. And so
right.
Does the master contract include a price, a budget, and then when does that get handed over to Shane?
No, it's our master agreement. And since we're design build, it's to start the initial design process. So these people at this point either only have the lot or are looking for the lot, and we are looking with them. When they get to the stage where they want to engage us from a design, architecturally and interior design, then we present them with the master design build agreement, which we call it. So it sets forth the process for design, starting out with just designing a floor plan, schematics, going through, approving that floor plan, getting a price, and then what happens once you get a price. And then it sets forth the details of the construction process, how we do payments, all our terms and conditions. So once we get the plans to a point where we can price them, then Shane will send them out to bid to our contractors and then present them with what's called a construction addendum, which is an addendum to the design build agreement, and that details the construction price. And then, he presents that, negotiates that, and then once they sign off on the construction addendum, then we're off and running, putting a shovel in the ground.
That makes more sense. And so, you are managing the architecture then and interior design as well, or are you subcontracting the interior design?
We have an architect on staff, in-house architect, and then we have an architect that we work with on a subcontract basis, who we've been working with for decades. And then we have interior designers who we subcontract, but everything goes through us. And so, they come to us for the full service. We assemble the team, the architect, the interior designer, put everyone together. We charge them a fixed fee for this. And then they have, it's kind of a one-stop shop for everything. So you're not going for an independent architect and then getting a contractor and then getting a interior designer. We do that all in-house.
So let me ask you this. Do you ever get pushback? Because I would imagine it's difficult. Everyone wants to know the cost of a project, and it's like, well, what's it cost for a bag of groceries, right? I mean, there's so much variation, as you know, and the market's changing every day right now in this economy. So when a client comes in, I'd imagine to some extent they say, hey, Rob and Shane, we're ready to start the first phase of design. So I would imagine there's a fee structure for the architecture, right? Immediately,
Right.
because you're going to go through design. Now, is budget spoken about at that point? And then how do you manage that before it even gets to hard pricing when Shane gets involved?
I mean,
Well, our design fee is set out where we just start with an hourly rate. We don't know what it's going to be. It's just an hourly rate for our designers and architects. And then once it gets to construction, it converts to a fixed fee, and any monies paid gets applied to that. Now, in the beginning, and Shane can talk to you a little bit more about construction price, but in the beginning, we are definitely talking budget. We don't know what their house is going to cost. Every house is different. They're custom, but we know in general what the prices are. So for our region right now, we're saying, what we're seeing for new product is going to be in the 600 a square foot range. If that's something that's in your budget, then let's move forward with this and we can do it. If they're like, well, we were hoping for 250 a square foot, and say, well, we're not the contractor for you. And
Yeah,
so tell you a little more like where prices are coming in.
Yeah, before I get to Shane on that, so it's a little bit more high level where the easiest way to handle or vet the client, if you will, is as you mentioned, you understand the current projects you have under your umbrella and envelope, and so you have a good idea of the range, right? So, and if they're half of that or a third of that, you know that it's not the ideal client. You can't make the numbers work, But as far as going back to the design, so what my understanding is that you have an hourly rate set that's going to probably work through floor plan, maybe elevation. But before you get into CDs or like complete and construction drawings, you essentially present a fee to them, and then you deduct the hours you've already had, and then you build the rest as you start working through engineering and consultants and permitting.
Sort of. We bill on an hourly rate, and then we bill on an hourly rate until we have enough drawings to generate a construction price.
Okay.
Once we have enough drawings to generate a construction price, Shane presents that, negotiates that. Once they agree, sign on the dotted line on the construction price, say $1 million, they sign for it, then our design fee converts to a fixed percentage, and any money paid prior gets applied to that fixed percentage.
So do you ever have clients that, because with the design build, ideally, right, the whole goal is they're going to hire you for the architecture, design, and the build. Do you ever, when the pricing comes back, do you ever get pushback where they say, hey, Shane, now that this is your window, of pricing, we want to get another bid, or the pricing is one we like, we want to go a different direction? I mean, how do you handle that conversation with the client?
I mean, yes, we definitely have had that before. And, being design build, having a full-time estimator, we can easily value engineering. We're doing a big project now. The first price came in a little too high. So we, did some redesigning, we shaved it off, and now it looks like they're going to sign.
Okay. So, and there's an advantage there. So with you having in-house design, it is a lot easier to VE and look at this as a whole, where one arm's speaking to the other because it's in-house, right? So when VE for you, I'd imagine is a little bit more of a simple process and it's more streamlined as opposed to if you're working with outside consultants.
Exactly. I mean, the nice thing is our architect can walk down the hallway to our estimator and say, they want to add a 10 by 10 gym or something. What range do you think that's going to be? And then the architect can go right back to the client and tell them.
Yeah, that's good advice right there. Especially having it right there. So when you're looking at design, though, I mean, is it the same on every project that the stopping point's the same as far as that hourly? Rob, when you're looking at design, do you get to floor plan elevations, or is it further? Is it the same stopping point?
I mean, a lot is dependent on the client. Design is, I always tell them, is heavily driven by the client's involvement, timeline, etc. So some are, hot to trot. They want like a price as quickly as possible. And, so we, kind of do the bare minimum drawings to get a price and then, present that way and move forward. So it could be a little quicker. Some want to take a lot more time and make sure everything's in capture. They don't want any change orders, anything like that. So that'll be a longer. So it really, depends on on the client on when we do that conversion. But essentially, it all happens whenever they sign the construction price. Once that happens, then they're on, contracted for the full design fee and the construction price.
And I think a good thing to point out is when we say $600 a square foot, that's just for the build. So that doesn't include the 8%. We also have an 8% tax here, and then any reimbursables such as government or consulting fees. When I say consulting, I mean like engineers. And
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, so consulting, or if you have special inspections, are you putting that in the bill price, or is that separate?
Yes.
So that would be separate as well. So then, and I mean, permits, I mean, you're similar to us. In Arizona, we're not design build myself in the way that you guys are at all. I'm working with outside architects and designers, but, very similar. We're looking at square foot price, and really that's C of O, right? So that would be the house, the driveway, everything you need to get C of O. Whereas pool and landscape, it's typically additional because, there's so many variables, right? Someone may have 2 acres of farmland where they're fully landscaping, and they'll spend, $800,000 in landscape and pool. Whereas there may be a desert lot where they have 2 acres, but they can only build on 10,000 square feet of it, and they'll spend, $150,000. So there's just so many variables. Are you designing the pool and landscape as well, or is that a side addition to the square foot?
We do. If they do want a pool, that goes through our contract, and obviously that would bring up the square footage price. As far as landscaping, that we pass that off.
So you never, but are you managing that in the field, like your supers and you as a team, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're managing it, but in the beginning process, when the landscaper comes in, we're definitely working with them.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's an exclusion on our contract.
Right.
So you are excluding landscape. You will want to have some sort of landscape design, because you do need to understand, if you're in a tight hillside lot and you don't have access, do you have to run gas lines, for maybe the fire pit or barbecue? Do you have to run drip line or at least sleeves under the driveway, possibly to irrigate 2 sides? So there is some coordination there. So are you working with landscape architecture, or is the landscaper himself doing those drawings?
Mostly the landscaper himself. Sometimes they do bring in a landscape architect. A lot of our high-end subdivisions, when we go through the design review process, they require a landscape plan up front before we're allowed to break ground. And so our architect will work with either their landscape architect or the landscaper to develop that.
So is there a strategy why you exclude landscape, just out of curiosity, but you'll do the pool?
Well, the pool, kind of can run with in conjunction with the house when we're building it. Yes, it kind of comes towards the end. After 2.5 years, we're just ready to pass it off. And the landscaping with maintenance, that could go on and on and on for.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot more to the maintenance side. And do you guys also assist with maintenance of the house after you're done with construction, or how do you manage, the warranty side?
We do a 1-year warranty where we'll go through, do a walkthrough, fix plaster cracks. Of course, anything like mechanical that happens within that 1 year, we'll go and fix. As relationships are everything, Brad. So, if a client calls, and your reputation, calls us 3 years later and there's something wrong, we'll go fix it. But as far as monthly maintenance or anything, we don't do that.
Yeah, and like some of the, as builder groups have those maintenance contracts, and we've considered that, but just, we're so stretched as it is on our, resources and everything else that we're not interested in starting another division.
There's some truth to that. Right now everyone's pretty stretched, and so for you guys, I know your structure, and we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, is that primarily you're lump sum. And so are you still doing lump sum despite this economy? For those that are listening that may not understand the difference, what is the difference, lump sum, cost plus, and then how has that dictated you guys? Yeah,
we do only lump sum. There has been a couple remodel projects that are smaller on scale and we'll do cost plus, but 99% it's lump sum. And so basically, the difference is we do a lump sum where we give you a price negotiated up front for everything except allowances. Things we obviously don't know yet, like cabinetry, surfaces. stuff like that, we'll keep as allowances. But for the main structure, this is our price. It's $1 million, and we can negotiate up that front. And then once we have that price, that's fixed throughout. We think that's the most beneficial for us and the clients because you're not worrying about cost overruns that aren't have anything to do with the client or things like that, and dealing with that throughout the whole project. We like to negotiate the price up front, and then we're done. Cost plus, on the other hand, where every item would be whatever the cost is of that item plus the contractor's fee, as you know. So it's whatever the framing was plus 15%. That's not how we work. We never have. We find it really successful. We like to have the project, like I said, from its infancy, from the moment we're just starting to put pencil to paper, all the way through construction, and have those fees negotiated up front and costs.
So how do you protect yourselves, just out of curiosity? Because we've done both. I've done a lot of lump sum in my career. I've done a lot of cost plus. I think this last year is the first time, at least I've seen. I mean, I saw high prices in 2007, 2008. Nothing like today from a material side. So how do you protect yourselves? Is there an escalation clause, or are you on the hook if lumber doubles or triples?
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was going to say because I just did this contract. Pre-pandemic, yes, we were on the hook for that because, in 40 years of business, never really had an issue.
Never seen
we had contingency, and, if we go over, we eat it. If we go under, great, we get a few extra bucks. But, it's been, normal operating. Ever since the pandemic, that's thrown, twists and everything, and we've thought about completely, like, throwing out the lump sum and going to cost plus because prices are so crazy. So I've totally revamped the contract with our attorney, and we're lump sum, but we're covered by all those kind of unforeseen events. We can be lump sum, but when there's huge fluctuations in cost, and now we put lumber as an allowance. It's just too wild, so we treat lumber as a cost plus item. I mean, it's just too wild to try and use it as a fixed cost number. So
that's interesting.
Kind of a hybrid of cost plus and lump sum when you really think about it.
Yeah. Did you have a point to that, Shane?
No, I was just going to say, we took, this past year, some pretty big hits when we had lumber in the lump sum. And we tried to send out letters and change orders to the clients, and a couple of them did pay the overage, and a couple of them said, no, you're lump sum. And so it wasn't worth the argument.
Yeah. It becomes tough, but that is interesting, and it is a smart way to approach it, because the question I was going to have for you, Rob, is not so much the transparency, but how do you communicate that, set that expectation with the client? But if you are saying, okay, we're going to build your house to the example you gave for $1 million, well, now if you're highlighting the allowance lines, like appliances, and putting lumber down there, well, now you're giving them a cost saying, okay, as of today, at least in Phoenix, I can only lock lumber pricing for 7 days, right? So you're saying as of today, lumber price is going to be, let's say, $100,000. Here's your allowance line. So if it goes down, by the time we order in 6 months from now and it's at 80,000, then that's their allowance. They're going to get a $20,000 delta credit, right? And if it goes up, they have to pay the difference. And so are there any other lines that you guys are seeing? Because we're getting price increases from everybody. However, with finishes, it's a little easier to substitute something. Steel, concrete, lumber, it's a little bit more difficult. And so that's why in working through this, now that you're a little bit more seasoned, working through the pandemic, you're moving these down to allowance lines, even though you're still a lump sum.
Right. And, a lot of our subs are really loyal to us. We give them a lot of work, and we don't get, but when we contract them for the price, usually they'll stick to it. And, I'm sure they have a contingency in there. The one who doesn't, obviously, because it has the biggest fluctuation, is our framer.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so what you mentioned that sometimes you don't have all the selections done, even though you're managing that design build process. Do you have a commitment to the client where, you're like, we're not going to break ground until we have all selections. We're not going to start framing. Is there a milestone that you're making sure all the selections are completed, or how are you tracking that through the build?
So basically, like on Builder Trend, we have a construction schedule and also a design schedule of when items need to be finalized. So the more we get up front, the better, especially now with lead times. We're really trying to push our designers during the permit process, during the grubbing process, try to get, as much done as selected as possible so we can order. Because as you know, they tell you, your plumbing fixtures are 6 weeks out, and then on week 5, they tell you they're another 6 weeks out.
Right.
But, I was going to add to that, we're in the business of making clients happy. And so we don't, we're not too rigorous on every client's different. Some of them, make a ton of changes, delayed decisions, and, we roll with the punches and just do the best we can to accommodate it. So sometimes we can have, most selections done by the time we break ground. Sometimes we can have very few and, and we're pushing, but, our clients, I'm sure yours are from all over the country and globe. So, sometimes they have limited time to get out here and to, really commit to the project. So we just work with each client individually, what's best for them, and accommodate their schedule and their needs.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you do remodels, you do new builds. Are you doing spec homes as well, or is it primarily build to suit?
We're primarily doing new builds. We have a large remodel going. We really have been saying no to all remodels lately because there's such a time suck, and with our
and talk about that,
resources right now. Yeah, it's new construction is really where it's at. So I think of our 15 projects or so in the field, 14 are new, and one is a remodel, a large remodel. And then we like to do one spec, going at a time. We don't like to do any more than that. We don't like to be leveraged or, Shane and I came in 2008, when the bottom fell out of the market. So, we still have that kind of fear and conservative approach, or we're we don't care how good things are, one at a time is all we'll do. And we've been really successful with it. And we're about to break ground on our one right now in a month or so.
So how is the market there right now?
It's on fire.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we used to tell, if 45 years ago, 6 years ago, if a house was 500, 450 a square foot on the market, that was expensive. And now you're seeing houses above 1,000 a square foot.
So you guys are dealing with a little bit similar, environment and climate as we are here in Phoenix.
And I don't know if it's similar for you, Brad, but we used to have a primary clientele, and they were from Texas. This was their second home.
Playground out here.
Yeah, this is their playground. And then all of a sudden, this last year and a half, and it was secondary homes. And now in this last year and a half, we have clients from Florida, North Carolina, Chicago, San Francisco, and it's all their permanent homes.
It's like an urban exodus from the pandemic.
Yeah, we're seeing that too. Predominantly, of course, we had a lot from California, some from the Midwest, and now we're getting from the Northeast, which typically they didn't migrate to Arizona. Rarely from the Northwest. We're seeing a lot out of Seattle and Portland, of course, move here. And as you mentioned, Rob, you said it, so you have a lot of people live in the metro cities. Companies such as Microsoft and Amazon, they're letting people work from home. Now they can relocate to, maybe get out of the city or somewhere cheaper in their mind, although it's driving up the costs. And for sure in New Mexico, where you guys are in Arizona, it's making it a little more expensive for everybody.
Yeah, 600 a square foot to someone coming from San Francisco or Manhattan, that's like a steal.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I think when you look at places like Aspen, Park City, Sun Valley, Santa Fe still is a steal. Compared to them. So they're comparing these different,
resort towns.
Yeah, resort towns, and Santa Fe still a steal, even though for us we think it's high.
Yeah, and it is if that's your comparison, especially if you want, more of a mountain, higher elevation, there's definitely, it's a lot cheaper in Santa Fe, respectively, compared to especially Park City or Sun Valley right now.
Yeah.
So then, going back to the overall process that you guys have, how does that affect your relationship? Do you guys have any internal battles, as brothers and trying to run your different departments?
Well, I'm stronger and bigger than him, so I can just beat him up if there's ever a no. Yeah. No, I think one thing, Shane and I grew up together, obviously. We worked in the restaurants together in California. He was my boss in the restaurant. He fired me at one point. I don't hold a grudge, but whatever. But we've always worked together. So I think, we have a successful working relationship. And I think our key is We each have our domain, our world, and we don't mess with the other one's world. I'm not going to go to Shane and tell him how, what super to put here or subcontractor to put here or certain things in the field. And Shane's not going to come to me and, tell me, about the contracts, how it should be changed with financial reporting or anything like that. And so I think we have a really healthy respect for each other and respect for what each other do. And we show that. And we, there's always stuff that comes up, but I don't know, in the last 10, 12 years since we took it over, there's been virtually no major conflict.
Which is impressive. It's always tough. You hear doing business with family or friends, it can create tension in the relationship. And so is that scope of work clearly defined? And in addition to that, how did you both define your roles in the sense that Shane is, going to be in construction out in the field and Rob, you're behind the scenes? How did you define that early on?
We did, before coming onto the company, we defined that. So Shane, has a history in management and part owner in restaurants in California. And when we were talking about coming on, I went and got my master's in accounting. So before even we came on, we were prepped and ready to go in our respective roles. And then, I'd say a lot happens organically, and I was going to say the other, big key to it is, you really got to check your ego at the door. I think that's where a lot of conflicts, happen, where you want it done your way and you're going to pound your chest. And Shane and I aren't like that at all. We'll take suggestions from anyone in our company. Anybody who wants to improve it, anybody does, I don't care what your rank, power, anything else is. We only see what's best for the company. And if that's always first and foremost in our mind, that, will lead us to success.
So it's that common goal, right? There's, you both have maybe your opinion on things, your perspective, your experience, history. But if the goal is the success of the company and the brand, then you're going to oversee and overlook maybe your imperfections or your partner's imperfections and always shoot for that goal.
Exactly. And I would hate to do what Rob does. I would have zero desire. And I think Rob would hate to do what I'm doing. But
I think they would hate me.
Well, I love that you shared that. It's interesting, Shane. I've spoken to, a lot of design firms where you have someone who's the senior lead designer running the design portion, then you have someone on the back end that's doing all the accounting, receiving, materials, furniture, whatever. And they're always successful. They couldn't do the other one's job. They don't want to. And so there's success there where there's not overlap because both of you don't want to do each other's job. And so that definitely creates a clear distinction, I'd imagine.
Right. It does. Yeah, I have expertise in my field. He has expertise in his field. If they're talking about the minutia construction and stuff like that, they're not coming to me.
So then, your side, Shane, I understand that you had restaurant experience and managing people, and a lot of what we do, especially if you're in the field, and this is key. I talk to our young superintendents about this all the time because they always ask, well, how do you communicate with subs? How are you firm but still forgiving, right? How do you manage this aspect, especially that client, being a little softer with the client? There's a lot of skill that comes with time managing people, but at the same time, you still have the technical side, right? This is a risk business. We are a risk for service contractor. And so you have to manage the quality, making sure you're passing inspections, the building science of this. So how did you get that expertise from the construction side to now go be effective running the field?
I think it's just been a process. And I think it's respecting my supers, my project manager, who now runs the job, that I respect, that I know that they know more than me. And I'm not going to tell them to do something that they're telling me, no, it really should be done this way. So, and for the last 12, however long it's been since we had it, 12 years, it's a continual learning process.
And it's interesting you say that, Shane, because, I will say the one thing that does frustrate me with younger, I shouldn't say younger, anyone that's new to construction, right, is we have a tendency as humans, we don't want people to think that we don't know what we're doing or we don't know what we're talking about, right? Because it makes us vulnerable and it makes us reluctant. And I find myself doing this too, where I don't ask the question because I don't want people to know that I don't even know the answer, right? That's why I'm asking the question. And so your willingness to put that aside, especially in construction where none of us know everything. There's so much to learn. Being willing to ask the question and having that respect. I mean, there is credibility that's built, and then you learn from that.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
We believe in empowering our employees and, making sure they have a stake in what they're doing. So we want them, to make these decisions. Shane and I are not micromanagers. We're not going to be out there over somebody's shoulder. We believe in results. We believe in supporting you in whatever you may need, and then we expect results. And if there's not results, then, obviously you're not the right fit. But, we really want these guys to, to run their own little empires out there.
And
Now, go ahead, Shane.
I was just going to say, I think one thing to mention is, we have very, very little turnover. Most of our employees have been with us, 10, 15 years, in that range. So like Rob said, we try to create a culture of not micromanaging, of empowering. We have a no abusive policy. I don't want my supers yelling at subs, and I don't want my subs yelling at my supers.
And Brad, we do 2 golf tournaments, company golf tournaments a year, where we take the guys out to the nicest club in the state and treat them to a day of golf and fun. So, I mean, who wouldn't want to work for Woods with those kind of
right? I think I'm going to send my application, right? I mean, speaking golf now, so do all of them like to golf? Or they at least maybe like to drink and have fun out there?
Most of them like to drink, have fun. We brought up some of them. If any of them are really good, we start getting concerned because it's like, how do you have time to be good at golf? Right. You're obviously not on the site enough. Like, golf is not a game you can be good at unless you're spending 5 hours a day.
Now, we're super excited to welcome one of our new sponsors to the podcast, Pella Windows. And this is even more exciting because we use Pella in so many of our projects, nearly all of them. And they've been just an incredible partner of ours. And locally, Sammy and Adam, they are not only amazing business partners behind us, but they are super close friends. And I speak on the podcast all the time about the importance of relationships, right? Relationships with our customers, with our vendors, with our suppliers, because at the end of the day, I'm only as good as those that help our brand and assist us in our projects to take it from the ground up all the way to completion. And if we didn't have partners such as Pella, there's no way we'd be who we are today. Over the years, we've built this amazing relationship. When we call them or email them, they respond. They're quick. Their company culture, their integrity, their honesty, they are always there to do what's right for us and the customer. They can do anything from small replacement projects to large custom homes and even multi-million-dollar commercial projects. And also, when you think about their product line, they can do ultra contemporary, historical preservation, and large traditional projects. So for anyone, any scale, any size, they're the ones to call. They're here local. They have an amazing Instagram. Make sure to give them a follow to see what they're doing. So if you need windows and doors, give Sammy and Adam a call. We stand behind Pella. We love what they do, their culture, their brand, and especially their quality. And if you want to learn more about Pella Windows, check our show notes. We'll have everything tagged there so you can give them a follow and have their contact information to reach out. And now let's get back into the episode. I was just having a conversation with a contractor in Utah, Tyler Farrell, with Kilowatt, and it was interesting. We were just talking about employee benefits and pay and bonus structure. And the conversation we're having is we're trying to figure out how, both he and I, construction is a very tough industry when you're figuring out how to incentivize your people, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of ways to do that. It's not so much, some employees do want the dollar, right? Some employees want the culture. Some want the less stress. Some want that family. Some want the golf, as you mentioned. I mean, there's different things to do, and you have to understand what reaches each of them. And what's tough is understanding, goals for them, right? How do you empower them? How do you give them goals? How do you give them that leash and still make sure they're not making mistakes? And so from your side, Rob, to the field, are you job costing? Are you tracking costs month? Like if projects are extending, then are you giving Shane a call? I mean, how are you balancing the accounting side to the field?
So we do what's called a committed cost report that I prepare. And essentially that is our detailed schedule of values. Everything from Home Depot, field labor, equipment to major trades. And then we have a budget column, how much we budgeted with the client, how much we have cost to date column, and then how much is committed, meaning, contracted or PO. And then I added an additional column of what we expect to spend total for this line item for the whole project. So we have a detailed cost report that we can see the bottom line. Okay, we expect to spend $1.5 million total on this job. Now, we go through this report and each line item by line item once a month per job with the project superintendent, the project manager, Shane, myself, and Ben, the estimator. And so we can see, we're tracking it. We're like, okay, Thomas, your field labor is $4,000. You only have $1,000 left. We're lump sum. Like what's going on here? You got to be really, cost conscious here going forward. We don't want to avoid a cost overrun.
I love that you do that because I think this is one aspect that most contractors don't spend any time or enough time, right? As you start thinking about the purpose of a budget is to live within the confines of that budget, spend accordingly. And if you're blind, if you don't know what you're spending and what your cost overruns are, you come to that project and you're like, well, I don't have any money. Why weren't we profitable, right? And so what you're doing, Rob, to understand is whether you call it indicated outcome or a committed cost report, when you, especially on lump sum, it's really key because when you sign a contract, you have a guess of your profitability. You're going to guess how long it's going to take, the management hours are billed, the temp labor, materials, Home Depot, whatever. And so, and even, what you have budgeted for concrete, which you actually pay for concrete. So what you're doing is tracking this. So then that way the super is very clear every month. Okay, I'm overrunning this line. I'm under this line, I'm over this line. And so they can really track that as they go forward.
Right. And it's huge for historical data for Shane and our estimator because we can go look for patterns. I'll send them patterns all the time and said, in the last 4 jobs, we've gone over budget on field labor and finished carpentry. Now, labor costs are through the roof and there's a shortage. We have to up our budget on those. So when they are preparing the budgets, they're like, all right, well, let's add 15% to account for these overages. So it really informs. And, from an accounting standpoint, it's key on how you recognize your income for your WIP report. You got to put in your WIP report what you expect to make on that job. And that's how we recognize our income. So I tell these guys, when we're going over these line items, it's not just like pull it out of wherever. Like we really got to think about it and, about the number we're doing, because this number translates to the WIP report, translates to our income on the, our overbillings on the balance sheet, our recognized income on the income statement. So it's a very important exercise.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because the thing is, Rob, the work in progress, the WIP is very different for construction. It's a very complicated number and most companies really struggle generating an accurate WIP. And the issue, if you don't, you could pay too many taxes, you could pay too little taxes, there could be penalties, right? And to your point, I love that you do this. And this is something, I speak about. No matter the size of your company, you need to have someone good that understands accounting, right? Principles. You need to have someone that, if you're big enough, have a good CFO or controller. I know now internally with us, and you brought this up, Rob, is that as we're bidding projects, this is fluid, it's changing. And that data, that history is key because even I sat down really with my controller, McCall, and she's like, look, Brad, year to date, this is what you spent on marketing. Year to date, this is what you spent on this or sales, to get business development, food, entertainment, whatever it is. And here's what you spent last year. Here's what you spent last quarter. And so you're tracking these things that are totally outside. But then even more so to your point, we're tracking how much temp labor did we need? How much, what were our dumpsters? We budgeted, $8,000 for dumpsters and it's 14. Well, why is that delta Porta Johns? And so all this stuff is fluid. And if you're tracking it, it gives you a better starting point for your estimating team.
Yeah, and the key is forecasting. The whole point of this is to forecast. You can have a ton of budgets and you track them and, this is over. But you got to look for patterns and you got to forecast, and that's what, helps you in the long run.
So Rob, did you know that you were going to come into the business? Is that why you did go get a master's of accounting? Was it specialized in construction or real estate, or, how did that conversation happen?
I think when Shane and I were talking about taking over the company, we just talked about our roles, and it seemed pretty natural. I have a business administration degree from the University of San Diego, and Shane's, had a history of managing, and it seemed like it made the most sense for me to kind of take over the finance side, and Shane to take over the operation side. So I just, naturally said, all right, well, I'm going to go get, a degree in accounting because I know business, but I don't know accounting that well. And my role was coming on to replace the CFO. And we had a whole plan where she was going to be here for 6 weeks or so and train me. Well, day 2, she figured out she's training her replacement, and she leaves.
Oh, so she didn't know that you were replacing
So I
her.
got left to the wolves. I had a CPA come in and help me. I went to a bunch of seminars I learned WHIP from a seminar in Phoenix that was specifically on WHIP. I never knew what a WHIP was. And so I was, and like I said, we're coming in at the depths of the recession. So, I think that's the best way to learn, is just cut your teeth on it.
Okay, so hold on. This is just to understand, especially for our listeners. I mean, what was the dynamic of Woods Design Builders before both of you came in? I mean, what was the ownership structure? And then what enticed that conversation for you two to come in and say, okay, we're going to come in and take this over?
Well, my mom was the primary, she was the owner. And she had set up an ESOP with the employees as an
employee stock ownership program.
Yep.
Right. And then she came to find out that they were taking advantage. The previous person who Rob trained with for 10 days, we're pretty sure he was stealing. Same with the project manager. And so my mom called up Rob and I, and this was 07, I think, somewhere in there, and basically said, this is your last chance. And, do you want to have an opportunity to take over the company? And Rob and I both talked and thought, absolutely, let's not give it up. Because if you would have asked Rob and I when we were 18, 20, 22, if we were ever going to move back to Santa Fe and work construction, we would have told you you're freaking crazy.
We were going to be professional surfers. Yeah. Something awesome. But and I think that what Shane's saying is that it was a really complicated time to come in because the ESOP was already in place.
Right.
And the company had to buy out the ESOP. So we had to get a professional construction valuation firm to come in, value the company, and then the company with its resources had to pay off that ESOP, where each of the employees got whatever their share was in dollar-wise, and then that brought full ownership back to my mom, and then we negotiated a deal with my mom where we bought her out and paid her over a period of time, and I think it's really just been we really completed the last payments to her a few years ago.
So that's interesting. So at the time, there was your mom was principal, she's owner. It's an
right.
ESOP. There's a little storm brewing, essentially, with a couple of employees, and your mom's like, okay, well, this is your chance to come in. And then, of course, it's complicated for you both because now you got to figure out the buyout for the partners and then eventually her. Now, this is really the tough part. The more people I speak with, they really have a challenge when they're taking over the business from their parents, right? You start thinking exit strategy. Most of us, which we'll get into exit strategy later, do we have one? Do you guys have exit strategy plan now? Are you building to that? But where it stands now, how was that dynamic? Was it a clean break when your mom comes in and you're like, oh, this is perfect, we're going to take over? I'm sure she still had her opinion on how things should run. So how did you clearly define this? And the reason I ask is because the conversations I've had with other contractors are like, Brad, I'm taking over from my mom and dad, but they don't believe in marketing, right? They don't believe in social media. They don't believe in maybe building science or doing systems or builder trend because they kind of old school, this is their methodology. And so there's a lot of friction, that relationship. And then, as you mentioned, trying to figure out a valuation, a buyout. Do I take them out now? Do I keep them on board? Do I move to a sales role? How did that dynamic work between you guys and your mom?
Right. And to your point, my mom thinks Builder 20 is the craziest idea she's ever heard. I'm meeting with 20 random people and telling them how you do business. Why don't you just give away the whole recipe? She just thinks, it's insane. So it just goes to show you how different,
construction was way different. Our younger generation looks at this much different, right? It's much more transparent.
I think the biggest challenge was Woods Design Builders was Sharon Woods. It was her brand. She had, at that time when we were coming on, it was just turning 40 years. So she'd been doing it for 40. And her releasing that and how Rob and I changed that brand from Sharon Woods to Woods Design Builders. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and rightfully so, was my mom letting it go. Passing us on. Letting me do the sales without her, and just slowly let it go. And that was the biggest challenge. I mean, we went to family therapy. We brought in different coaches. Like we threw everything against the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long process. We wrote up tons of documents, defining each other's roles, setting benchmarks on when we would take over certain roles and responsibilities. Most of them got crumpled up and thrown in the trash because they just,
right when you walked out of the room.
Yeah, there's got to be some level of organically coming because you're just not quite sure because it's two-way street. The people, Shane and I, had to be ready to take it over to where it could be successful, and my mom has to be ready to relinquish in order to allow us to be successful. The thing I tell all our our Builder 20 Club and the same thing is like, you really got to have some honest conversations with your parents on when they are really going to let it go. Because the only time you can be successful is when they take their hands off the wheel and just let you run with it. And whether you drive it into the ground, you're going to make every mistake in the book. I know we have, but that's the only way you learn from them and get successful. As long as they're, that you need them for a while, definitely. But at some point, you got to cut the cord or it's only going to hurt you.
So was there a strategy before getting to the counseling side and all that, Shane, right? When you start thinking about Sharon Woods Enterprises to now Rob and Shane taking over, Woods Design Builders, how did you combat that when there's a reputation that your mom had and now it's the sons, the boys taking over? But did you do it through marketing, through social media, through relations? I mean, how did you?
Not really social media because this was 12 years ago. It was more, as like Rob said, having to relinquish. If she was in the first sales meeting or if she was in with me presenting the estimate, well, then everybody turns to her. Mm-hmm. I'm just the kid. So it was slowly baby steps of where Rob and I would say, okay, we are the primary contact with this client. You're not involved with this project. And it kind of went.
And through marketing too, we have a big event,
Exactly.
the Parade of Homes here, where we interface with thousands of people who come see our homes, and that started to be where we would do it with her, and then without her, and then so just slowly. It's a long process. Slowly over time, we still get people calling for Sharon Woods, and she doesn't work here anymore. It takes a long time, but over time, as you get new clients, and she's not involved in the process at all. Now all of our clients, don't really, they don't know Sharon Woods at all.
No, we're more known as Woods Brothers Construction.
Yeah. So, yeah, it definitely takes a lot of time, but, but like I said, it's one thing for the owner, the parent, what have you, to say they want to be done at X amount of time and step away, and it's another thing for them to actually do it. Because this is their baby. And so, still she'll come to us and be like, well, do you need my help with it? Like, no, Mom, we don't need your help. We've been doing this now for 10 years and we're fine. So, but it's hard. I mean, I get it. It's hard to let go. I mean,
it is. And so, going back to that, I guess, from 2008, you come on board. Of course, Rob, you step into Whirlwind. I mean, what was the communication? If you were planning to take over for the CFO and they didn't know and then found out, how long did it take you to get kind of your wheels under you and get that all figured out?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, I was just strictly an employee of my mom. I had no ownership or anything. I was coming into this new role, and it was super tough. And my mom is an amazing designer. She's amazing at what she does. She doesn't know anything about accounting or books or anything. So she was, her and Shane would work more hand in hand at that side. She was more familiar with that. But accounting and finance, she didn't know anything. So it was just trial by fire. I mean, like I said, I hired a CPA who came in with me, combed through all the books, kind of showing me, from the ground up on what to do. I went to seminars, I went to classes, and, just learned a lot on the fly.
And then from your side, Shane, I mean, and Rob as well, when 2008 you moved there, how long until that separation and transition went from when Sharon left?
Oh, God, that was a while. At least.
Yeah, I think she was here till 2000. 2015 or 16?
15 or 16. So 08 to
Yeah,
15.
2012, or was it 2010? We officially took ownership of the company.
Right, and then the buyout.
Yeah, and then started the buyout, which we paid her, a percent of the proceeds for the next 5 years and had a buyout number. And then I think it was about 5 years where she was still on. And I would just say, I don't know if we're going to cover this topic later or not, but also telling people in the 20 group, one of the trickiest parts is coming up with that buyout number. Because as you know, construction's a really hard industry to put a number to a company. I mean, we don't have many assets. We sub everything out. We got a building. You have your goodwill. You have your reputation. And the person selling it to you is taking that reputation. So how do you value, and you have your contracts and things like that. So I always say, we engage professional construction industry experienced companies to value our company so we can, have a fair number and know what we're doing. 'Cause that's a really tricky thing.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Rob, because this is the hardest part when you're a fee business, right? You're only as profitable as the fee structure you can charge, and then you're only as good as the people doing the sales, right? And performing. Right. And so it's very complicated. It's not like you're a production company or a manufacturing company where you have products going down the line. There's assets, there's equipment, where you can value this stuff. It's all not pie in the sky, but it's arbitrary, right? And so as you bring someone in, so did you bring someone in to evaluate the ESOP and then someone else to evaluate the buyout, or was it the same valuation the first time for both of those?
It was the same person who we used for both. The ESOP was a lot more formal, I mean, you have to report it all to the, IRS and everything and very detailed. And then, they came in later to help us out with finding a value. And, and you're also finding what's fair. I mean, we had negotiated first, this is kind of the value we can, pay it this way, but thought also, she's going to be on for a while. She's built this company. So we agreed, 2% of the revenues over $3.5 million, over your kind of break even point, she would get, 2% of that, for the next 5 years. And so as the company grew over the next 5 years, because obviously we're climbing out of the recession, she was still getting, some nice checks there. So yeah, you want to, you got to use both. You want to get a professional's input, and then you got to, it's family. So you're not trying to screw each other.
Right.
Yeah, but you want to be successful too. And I imagine I'm not sure if there's conflict there. I imagine that'd be challenging. I've sat in buyouts or acquisitions of other companies, and I've seen, and they've been construction companies. So I've seen where, everyone's signing their NDA, right? And you're coming through the financials, and, the owner who has put his or her, time and equity and money into this company, it's their baby, as you mentioned, like with your mom. And then they're handing that over. I mean, they feel there's a certain value they want to be compensated for in value. And then for you, the buyer, I mean, there has to be value that makes sense so you can afford it as well as perform and be successful.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. That's what inherent in the, the seller is a higher price is in their best interest. Inherent in buying it, your best interest is a lower price. And for good reason. You're taking on a lot of risk. I mean, this is like you said, we're in a risk business. So it can be great or it can blow up in your face. And, you got to account for that too and get the price.
Yeah, it's interesting. So how does that relationship stand today? I mean, I guess before that question, Shane, going back to it, I mean, you mentioned there's some counseling involved and a lot of work. I mean, was that successful?
That, Shane.
No, but it's okay. I mean, it's not like this is anything unforeseen. I mean, trust me, all the conversations I have with contractors, this is very common where they are doing counseling and they're trying to figure out, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, all of us should take counseling, right? I think it's good for all of us, but I think it's healthy because all of us have different ways of running a business, and to be a successful business or partnership, you have to have that open communication. And a lot of times when there's a mediator, a third party, they could say, hey, Shane, maybe this is good. Hey, Sharon, this is good. And so it's a good thing. This is not a bad look by any means.
Right. No, it was challenging. I think one of the other challenges was keeping business, and then family. So you were working together, and then you go to her house for dinner. You don't want to be everybody talking about work,
right?
And so and that was one thing we really tried to draw the line at, which we did okay at. again, I think it really just came down to kind of just having my mom just start to step away. And she just, for a long time, she just was not ready to do that. And that caused, conflict.
Yeah, I think the most conflict was towards the years when she was starting to step away, and we were really ready. In the beginning, we weren't ready to take it on. I mean, no one's was gonna listen to Shane and I, were super green about spending $4 million on a house. We needed her, but as we got our feet underneath us, and then she started moving out, that's when was probably the most friction, because we would either stay or have expectations, well, we're going to handle this, or our architect's going to do this, and then she'll come and take it over. And it's just like, you're totally, undermined when you do that, because that's, and I think that was a lot of conflict. And like you said, it's great. Therapy was great. We had a business coach, again, from Scottsdale, actually, or Phoenix, who came out, stayed at my mom's guest house, and, went through everything with us. It's really important to have that third party objectivity, because she's our mom, we're her kids. Like, she would say things like, well, you would never say that to a regular boss, and we're like, well, you would never treat a regular employee like that. And so it's all these weird things that you got to kind of navigate through. In the end, like we always said, number one priority is family. Number one priority is that it doesn't affect our relationships. And kind of like how we say in the business, put the business first. When it dealt with our dynamic relationships, with family first. And no matter what would happen, we'd all meet for dinner on Sunday night at her house or whatever, and, show up for each other and support. It never bled into where it hurt our personal relationships.
Well, I love that you're both open about sharing this, because there's so much value from just learning about how to approach this from a buyout, especially when family's involved. And it's no different. Any company, even if there's not a buyout, or there's not a parent, or there's not an operation, I mean, it's as simple as you could have someone that's in the field, and as your company's growing, now they're moved into maybe a director of operations or in the office. And I've seen that, right, with companies where now the superintendent and now the project manager's like, well, I don't think they know how to manage this job properly. Did you call your concrete sub? The PM's going to text the super, did you call your concrete sub? But then the PM jumps over him and calls the concrete sub anyways, and then calls the superintendent saying, hey, I called him, here's what's happening. And they undermine that leadership. And so that's tough. That's just human dynamics. I mean, all of us struggle with that to some extent. And so it's just good practice, right? To understand, that third party objectivity, understanding how to find a neutral playing field, find out the priority. As you guys mentioned, hey, the priorities would design build, the priorities are relationship as a family. And then you have to monitor and work through that stuff, which is a lot of work. But
yeah, and I think you have to remember to have some grace and understanding. Like, we would get worked up about our mom undermining us, but then at the same time be like, I mean, it's tough for her. She built this company, her and my dad split in the 90s. She took it over as a single woman in a very, heavily macho industry, and fought her way tooth and nail, and that's hard for her. And then we would say the same thing to us, like, you got to remember, this is all new and scary and risky for us. So give us a chance. We're going to fail. We're going to, have problems, but just kind of extend that grace. I think that's a key part of it.
It's a very mature answer, Rob. I will say, just that perspective, understanding where she's coming from, by you having that maturity, you and Shane, to understand that there is a lot of value and power there, because a lot of us don't understand what other people are going through or dealing with. And that transition, right, as you mentioned, just the determination she had to have to be successful in this industry and take it over, and then relinquishing that, not an easy thing. So have you guys thought about that now? I mean, you're super young. You have young families. I mean, you have a long career ahead of you. Have you thought about just exit strategy to be more prepared in the future, or is that going to be sometime down the road?
For me, it'd be sometime down the road. I haven't thought about an exit strategy.
I'm out of here next year.
I'm out of here.
No, it's I mean, we have a buy-sell agreement in place, so right. we have these things. I think what our goal is we want to be working for a while. But we started out in the minutia of the business. Me doing data entry for every accounting entry that there is, and Shane being on the job site the entire time, watching every step. And so we've kind of accelerated this lately, is tried to step back more and have the company kind of run itself more, and we can look at other options, other ventures. We both picked up some rental properties, doing some other stuff. I think that's our goal, is to not be involved in the day-to-day as much. So we elevated one of the supers to a project manager to take over a lot that Shane does. I have our office manager and an outside accounting firm doing a lot of what I used to do, really just leaving to us focusing on the big picture and giving us more flexibility. I mean, we like to travel, we like to be with our families, we like to do other ventures, and that's kind of our goal. As far as exit, I don't know. I mean, we would love to see one of our boys or, together take over or come and work for the business. We'll see. I think third generation businesses, I think, have like a 13% success rate. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's amazing to be thinking down third generation. But what you shared is really important, Rob, because when you look at successful companies, they'll put their salespeople all the way at the bottom to work through and understand, like in a production facility, what is every job task, right? So they understand how the product's made and that aspect. And so the minutia part, which you both learned, and now where you become effective CEOs, now that you put systems in place and people in place and empower them, you can look at the health of the business, and that's really where you become successful as a company. And so, going back to the Build of 20, when your mom's like, hey, what are you guys thinking? I mean, how did that conversation come up? How did you guys even find out about the Build of 20?
Well, I mean, one of our things was, like I said, we were always constantly looking for continuing ed, seminars, stuff like that. We went to different seminars all over the country, and then, obviously went to IBS and stumbled on this, it was this like fancy room, this 2020 club. I didn't know what it was. They explained it to me, and I was like, this is genius. Like, there's so many questions I would love to ask our competitor, but it would be really weird if I picked up the phone and asked him if he's a cost plus or, how he structured his fee. And so to have these guys who, are experienced, the best in the business, able to answer any of our questions, and they were really intrigued with us because they were all, as you see now with the kids coming on, when we came on, they were just talking about the idea of their kids coming on into the business. And so they really wanted to hear from us, who were further along, about, success and pitfalls. And so it was, a win-win situation.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it is. I'm grateful too to be part with you guys and members of that group. It's been amazingly beneficial. Just expedites that growth. And yeah, I will say that's the value of social media, right? You get connected with other people. Build the 20 groups where you that education, because really at the end of the day, you're Rob and Shane, you're trying to be the best builders you can in your market, and you have to understand what people are doing in other markets to be successful in yours and apply that to really deliver the best product for your client.
Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the best decisions we made as far as growth.
Yeah, and it's been amazing.
Rewarding. Go ahead, Shane.
I was going to say, just from learning from the best of the best. There's so much stuff that we've incorporated in our company now that we would have never even thought of.
And so you mentioned this a little bit. So what do you guys enjoy doing for fun? I know you love golf. You have families. You love the vacation. I mean, what are some of the other things that you do outside of the normal day to day?
As you said, golf, mountain bike, family time,
pro surfing.
Surfing. Just got back from Punta Mita in Mexico, which was amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're huge skiers, love to ski every weekend. I love to trail run and mountain bike and do all that stuff. And right now with where our kids are at, we are like, we're kind of like chauffeurs to the next activity in sport. I mean, I think there's 4 soccer games an hour away this weekend. So I don't have a weekend. That's my weekend.
That's your weekend. I don't know. I know Brad's going to have any sympathy for us. How many kids do you have, Brad?
You know what? Everyone has their complicated life. I know, with many kids, as you both have, and me as well. It's definitely no rest for the weary, right? Between business and family.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So what?
No, go ahead,
Shane. No, go ahead.
No, I think the one thing that Rob and I have done, and when we set the culture of the company, because a lot of our employees have young kids that are in the similar age, that family comes first.
And I love that. And I love when companies don't just say that they actually mean to do something, and,
right.
When you see companies where their kids may have a cross-country race, or they have a sporting event or a recital, whatever, and they they allow them to go do that, right? I mean, there's value there where it's not just, hey, you have to take your PTO, and there's that flexibility, and that's value for the employee too.
Exactly.
Well, and I was actually thinking, going back to what you said earlier about like how you're trying to motivate each employee. I know from the sociology class I took forever ago that money is one of the least effective motivators. People say it, but you don't get up in the morning and say, I'm excited to go to work because I'm going to make $28 an hour instead of 25. You get up because you're excited, because you like the people you work with, you like the job that you do, you're respected by your peers and your bosses. So I think, and our culture is like Shane said, like, yeah, family's first. If you got a kid thing to do, go do it. We're more interested in results. We are not interested in to make sure you're here from 8 to 5. That's not an effective productivity in my mind. Effective productivity is somebody who's happy and makes most of their time and gets results.
Yeah, I love that mindset. And it just shows the company you built, right? And to work through that transition with your mom, with Sharon, to work through building that company culture. I mean, that's why you're successful today. So what's upcoming and exciting for Woods Design Builders?
What's up? Too many projects. No, we're doing probably our most exciting project we've ever done. It's really outside of our wheelhouse. It was a client who had a 6,000 square foot house that we tore down, and we're building a 1-bedroom, 6,000 square foot house. Has a 3,000 square foot basement, which is a spa. The whole middle floor, and it's all ICF and Epic Deck. The middle floor is all the living area. Then the third floor is their master suite. It's right on a river, probably one of the most beautiful places in Santa Fe, a place called the Suki. And then we're doing same property, a 3-bedroom bunkhouse, which has a drive-in 3,000 square foot basement, which is totally, we've never done this. Then a pool, an office. It's crazy. So we're really excited when it's finished.
Yeah, those are exciting projects. They're fun ones to showcase and work on. And for those of us that want to follow along and check you guys out, where can we find you?
You can find us on, our website. We put, all our recently completed projects, and then we have drone photos of all of our ones in progress. So like the one Shane's talking about, you can see these, crazy elevation shots of these structures going up. You can find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, woodsbuilders.com.
Okay, we'll get that all tagged in the show notes here, and can't thank you enough, Rob and Shane, for making time today.
I really appreciate it, Brad.
All right, thanks, Brad.
So thank you all for tuning into the podcast today. And just as a recap, if you check the show notes, they're just going to have all the links for the topics that we discuss. And also one of our favorite features now is the chapters that go through the conversation. So if there's certain topics you want to revisit or listen to, they're outlined by the time that we discuss those. And again, we can't thank you enough for all of your support. Please make sure and download our podcast, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you download your podcast.